Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show. I believe this is episode 4. Episode 4, right, Bill?
That's correct. Episode 4, only our first one, though, in your brand new dig.
Yes. This is the first one in the studio on my property at Schilling Farms. And I will someday give you guys a look behind the scenes at Schilling Farm and Rescue so you can meet Hodor and Arya and Mance and all my animals. Lots going on. Spring training's underway. New rules are coming into play. It seems like every day, every game to some extent. And we're going to talk a lot about that, as well as delve into some pitchers that are hurt. And maybe I can help give you guys a realistic timeline on them returning, if they're going to return. Some tough ones too. Andrew Painter of the Phillies, who I saw as a huge piece of that puzzle this year. And then we're going to talk about closer by committee, which sucks. And one of the most amazing and probably longest shots ever in the history of gambling or betting was the winner of Major League Baseball's Most Handsome Manager. We're going to talk about that. But anyway, Billy, how we doing today?
We're doing great. I'm really fascinated by how the pitch clock is being tinkered with by some pitchers.
And I can absolutely see myself as one of these guys. And by one of these guys, I mean Max Scherzer in his last outing. He didn't have a great outing. He went 2 2/3, 5 hits, struck out 1. So it wasn't a great. But those things are okay in spring training. But he clearly is testing the boundaries of the pitch clock. And he touches on one thing that I think you're going to see him do and some other guys do. Couple events. He threw a pitch to Victor Robles just as the clock was reset, called for a balk. Runner went from first to second. With 2 outs and 2 strikes and Raleigh Adams in the third inning, Scherzer froze in the set position and let the pitch clock down to 7 before Adams called timeout. On the next pitch, this is where it's going to come into play. On the next pitch, Scherzer became set as the 20-second clock started, and I would absolutely be doing this. Adams finally stepped into the box with the clock at 11 seconds. Scherzer immediately delivered, getting a swinging strike on a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. You're going to see that something's going to change to that extent because hitters are going to bitch and moan about that one, because that one's going to be one that guys are going to be doing a lot of. He also had an inning double play called off because the pitch clock had narrowly run out. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to see the pitchers in the big leagues, the good ones, will find a way to make this pitch clock work. And I still think it's an enormous advantage, despite what Kevin Millar and his brilliant insight thought. And then Buck Showalter after the game. And Buck is a guy who will absolutely, if you want to watch how managers in the big leagues are going to react and play these new rules, watch this guy. Buck Showalter is probably the most prepared manager I've ever been around, ever played for. For those of you who don't know, I got traded to Arizona in 2000 and got a brief chance to play for Buck, and he is a dear, dear friend, and I think probably one of the game's best managers. I think he's got a good chance to do something. Anyway, he said this after the game. Max and a lot of veteran pitchers and pitchers in general are going to use this time to test some things and make some adjustments, end quote. Mets manager Buck Showalter said, everybody up here is looking for a competitive edge, hitters, pitchers, catchers, and it's a good time to be testing those things. I can't agree more. So in spring training, you go through a couple stages. You go from the young guy whose mental approach to every day in camp is, my God, I want to make the team. There's the younger guy whose mental approach is, I just want them to remember me. To the guy who's kind of established, to the guy who knows he's going to be pitching opening day and shows up at spring training as your ace and is getting ready. And those guys, those veteran guys that kind of have roster spots secured, you're going to see them pushing and the boundaries and the envelope on every one of, especially the pickoff rule. I'm still very curious to see how the pickoff rule. And Bill, when we were talking about it early on, I told you I thought the pickoff rule would be by a landslide the most impactful rule change. I don't know if it's either just not being tested yet, or but this pitch clock is going to have a far bigger impact on hitters than I was thinking.
I think Curt, that it's partially because these games don't mean as much, that you don't have guys stealing and making as many attempts and playing that game yet. I think when we get deeper into spring training, you might see
I'm going to interrupt you there. I'm going to interrupt you there. Players don't take that mentality.
No? That's interesting.
No, they don't. They don't, because within the game, you can only play it a certain way. Pitchers won't be throwing as hard as they are during the regular season, but their mental approach, while it might vary and it might be it's different than the regular season, they're trying to get results. Base runners are trying to get results. Like, you think about the young guys who are being kept, Bobby Witt Jr., who is an elite runner, Corbin Carroll, who's an elite runner. Those are the guys that are going to be, they'll be testing. And those guys are as worried, I think, more worried about making the roster in a Corbin Carroll situation, even though I think he's going to make it. But I think as you see spring training go, those base runners are going to change some things and try some things. And then you'll see, and I would use in my era, for people that remember, Jeff Bagwell and Scott Rowland, like a Dave Hollins, guys who weren't elite speed, but who stole 15 to 25 bases a year just because pitchers were dumb. Right. And they'll test it too. But I think that'll happen as spring training goes. But to your point, it's one thing I've always kind of chuckled about when fans say, oh, this was a meaningless game. Those don't exist for players. Now, veteran players, you think about your Miguel Cabreras and your Justin Verlanders. For the most pitching, you can't ever pitch a meaningless game. It just doesn't work that way. For good pitchers anyway. Hitters, they might go up trying to do some unique stuff during an at-bat that they wouldn't do during the season. But for the most part, there's max effort in the act, of hitting. Maybe not base running. Maybe they don't run as hard down the first or whatever. But it's one of the things that makes the Major League Baseball All-Star Game so unique and still amazing to watch, in my opinion, because it's the only professional sports All-Star Game where the effort is the same as the regular season.
Yeah.
So. No, I just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, I think as we get going, I think you're going to see, and here's the thing, a guy like, and I say this, a guy like Buck Showalter will go to a kid like Batty, right? Who is that people aren't sure if he's going to make the roster or whatever. Buck, for the most part, would be a guy that would go to that guy if he's on the roster and say, hey, listen, kid, you're going to break with this team. I want you to get comfortable with these new rules because you're going to be in the big leagues on opening day. And that 20-second at bat is going to go by very, very quickly. Or that 20-second pitch clock. So start getting whatever. That's the kind of things that Buck would think through and be ahead on. So it'll be interesting to see. But two things. We haven't seen the pickoff throw stuff impact nearly as much as I thought it was. And the pitch clock is going to be drastically more impactful on hitters than it's going to be pitchers. So
Agreed.
Along the same line, staying in New York and staying outside of Yankee Stadium, Verlander pitched last Saturday. 40-year-old Justin Verlander, by the way. And for anybody that doesn't know, that 40 years old was my age in my final season in 2007. He went 3 innings, 35 pitches, 28 strikes, which is right, his stuff. Used all his pitches, gave up an earned run, 2 hits, 3 punch outs. 96 on his 4-seam fastball. So for you fantasy guys who have your draft during spring training, I think it's comfortable to say we're what? Less than 2 weeks into games, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're less than 2 weeks into game. So, and I might have said this and briefly touched on this last time. I always got to spring training with the intent that opening day I wouldn't be on a pitch count because I was going to be the opening day guy or Randy or Pedro was late in my career. But I wanted to make sure when I went out on opening day that the clicker wasn't an impact on me coming or going in a game. And so I showed up at spring training with a very unique throwing program that allowed me to get going. I wanted 28 to 32 innings in spring training. My next to last start in spring training, I wanted to be 7 innings or 100 pitches. And then my final start would be 3-4 inning, 45 to 55 pitch. Kind of a thing where I was just kind of tuning up. But I wanted to make sure that I knew mentally where I was, but I wanted to make sure that my pitching coach and my manager weren't going to pull the trigger early on an opening day start. And Tito was very good about that. So it'll watch the workload for your pitchers. You'll see pay attention. You might not see some guys who be throwing backfield games. I never pitched against the divisional opponent in spring training because we had the heavily unbalanced schedule, which is now different. But I never wanted to, I didn't need to face Tampa or the Yankees or anybody in the AL East or whatever in the NL East when I was there, or the NL West, because I had video on all of them. So I was gonna, and then I would talk to my advanced scouts about the young players that were coming up. But I never wanted to give hitters in my division an early look. So that led to a lot of AAA games for me. And I remember early in my career, a lot of people were bitching about it. But when you get to a place where you can make those calls, like a Verlander can or a Scherzer can, those are the things you'll see in spring training. On another thing, and I got to tell you, Bill, I haven't paid a lot of attention to this. The PitchCom, which is the device set up between the pitcher and catcher to give pitches from the pitcher and catcher.
And this is the first year that they're going to allow the pitcher to use it and call his own pitches.
Yes. And I got to tell you, I have a couple thoughts about this. Number one, so apparently there's a funny story because if I remember correctly, in the first week of spring training games, one of the catchers had the volume up on his device, and the hitter and the umpire could hear every pitch. But I wouldn't use this. I wouldn't like to use it either, because when I say I don't think it's any different now, but when I played, the shake off was potentially a tactic, right? I would and my catchers understood that, and that's one of the reasons why I continued to work with the same catcher all year. I would use a shake. Catcher wouldn't give me a sign, and I'd shake, and then I'd shake, and then I'd shake, and he'd put down fastball, and I'd go yes. There are hitters who that impacts. Hitters who will think through a pitch sequence. I'm up here, I'm looking for a fastball in this count. Oh, wait a minute, is he shaking 3 times? You know, to some hitter, to not hitters like Manny, that doesn't impact, or Manny Ramirez, or I don't think a Mike Trout, but other hitters it will. And if you're a 4-pitch guy like a Verlander, or a power guy like Scherzer or Kershaw, the shake can be effective. You know, the PitchCom is a device to get the game sped up, or I think it was more the Houston Astros cheating, and the PitchCom was some. But for 100 years, people were able to give and take signs and have it be okay. For some reason, today's modern athletes are after a little bit of an edge. Anyway, Corbin Burnes, who was the 2021 Cy Young winner. Pitchers are experimenting with this. Some pitchers are experimenting with it, including Corbin Burnes. Many say Burnes has the best slider since Rivera. It was a cutter, not a slider. So sorry about that. But Smoltz would be a guy who I would compare a slider to. He hit, and this is kind of hard for people to and you can't comprehend this listening to box. He can throw it. His slider's been clocked at 96. And that's kind of Nintendo-ish. In his first and only start this spring, he used it to try and get used to it. It's a 9-button device that would tell the pitcher what he wants to throw. He said he only used it for a few pitches, but he hopes it will help him with the pitch clock. Yeah, okay. So you can see a guy using it for it'll be interesting, and I'm sure some guys will use it. If I was going to use it, to me, I don't know that I would do. I don't know that I would do it, because I think there are certain counts I want to shake, and I don't want to intermingle the device and the shake, right? First of all, I don't want to add that difficulty factor. There's a good tweet. I believe the Twitter account is Pitching Ninja, right, Bill?
Yes.
Pitching Ninja.
And that's where the video I saw of Greinke using it, and he looked locked in on it.
Oh, yeah. So a guy like Zach Greinke is a different cat, guys. He's just a different cat. And there are things that he does, and supremely talented, obviously. I think there's a strong case to be made that he's a potential Hall of Fame guy. But he was one of those guys that would manipulate and use the hell out of that system. So that's kind of it for the spring training pitching stuff as far as new rules, PitchCom goes. I want to talk about a couple pitchers' health next. So we're gonna jump on some stuff for you guys that are fantasy players. for you, if you're dumb enough to bet spring training, I'll give you some insight into some guys. And then there's somebody who we definitely want to send the show's thoughts and prayers out to, who recently received a diagnosis that we want to talk about. So on to the probably the most important thing. If you're a fan of a team, if you're a fantasy owner, if you're a gambler, the thing you need to pay attention to me, above all else, is the pitchers. Specifically starting pitchers, but pitchers in general, because spring training is where the attrition rate, I think, ramps up. And it's based on that. What I talked about last week was that 7-step process of effort that increases, and it can only increase when you experience the act, moving from the bullpen to batting practice to a spring game, yada, yada, yada. A kid who I'm in love with from one of my former teams, Andrew Painter, went down this weekend. And the discussion was around his elbow. Obviously, the first thing everybody thinks is Tommy John. And I think that's probably appropriate nowadays. They'll be extra cautious with this guy. But Bill, so I'll tell you what I do believe for sure. There's no chance he breaks camp opening day with the team at this point, because I think that they'll be extremely cautious. So you're probably talking about, I don't know, 10 days to 2 weeks of no throwing, which is in many ways is a reset for a lot of because you don't go 4 days in the offseason, 3 days without throwing, much less 10 to 14. And then a lot of it will depend on the pitcher himself. But I would imagine if you're a Phillies fan, don't expect him to be in the opening day lineup. Hopefully this is just inflammation, but I can tell you this. I believe it was when I played, and I researched the body. I sat in on an autopsy. I wanted to understand and study the workings and the machinations of the shoulder and the elbow. And I hurt my shoulder a couple times, had a couple of shoulder surgeries, never had anything done to I had bone spurs, but nothing structural. And one thing I learned back when I played, it might be different now, over 90% of the Tommy John surgeries until they opened them up, they didn't know, involved some pre-existing shoulder condition. You generally don't ever get elbow issues without an underlying shoulder issue. And if you understand how the body works, you kind of understand when your shoulder starts to become unstable, then things start to move in your elbow in ways and places and times they're not supposed to, which is why you see a lot of Tommy John. I also think there's a lot of Tommy John done almost unnecessarily, in the sense that I think pitchers, you see these guys, Bill, they come out, they go in throwing 91 and they come out of Tommy John throwing 95.
And those surgeries, Curt, they're doing to younger and younger kids. Those are the ones that I really think are very suspect.
Yeah, well, here's the problem. The reason these guys come back, because I did it too. I went into shoulder surgery being a 92 guy. I came out of shoulder surgery 12 months later being a 95, 96, 97 guy. Obviously had something to do with surgery. But the surgery was far down the list on reasons why. The most important was that I got educated on my body and the arm and the shoulder and how it works and how I make it stronger, understanding the difference between pain and injury and ache. You're sore every day of your life after you're 18, but pain is different. And that's why most guys will come out the other side when they're healthy, throwing much harder. So pay attention this week. I would expect him to be out in a couple weeks, but I would be stunned. I would put very good money on the fact he's not going to break camp opening day, but I think he would have if he had been healthy. And again, this goes back to, you got a young kid who's going into spring training and making his first 1 or 2 appearances. The effort level is different, especially for young kids. They're all out there trying to make the team, light up the gun and all the things that go with that. And that's not a good thing for health. Other pitchers that another guy who I love, we talked about last week, Tyler Glasnow of Tampa. His oblique issue, now out 6 to 8 weeks, missed most of last year after having Tommy John. That's what we talked about last week. So you're looking at a guy, oblique is probably as bad as it gets for a pitcher next to a major arm injury, because you can't throw. So you're looking at a guy who's going to be down 6 to 8 weeks, which means to me, you're looking at a guy who, 8 weeks is 2 months. You're probably talking about 4 months at a minimum before he's back, if everything goes perfectly. He's going to sit for 8 weeks. He has to restart. That's pretty much 8 weeks from starting to play catch again to being game ready. 8 weeks, maybe a little less depending, but we're talking about probably 4 months. So if you look at it's what, March, early March, April, May, June, July, somewhere around the All-Star break, probably, maybe a second half guy. If that timeline of being out holds up. Lance McCullers of the Astros, he has elbow issues. He had Tommy John, right? He had Tommy John.
He did.
Yes.
He missed.
Yes.
He missed a lot of a year last year.
So he hasn't started playing catch yet. So if I'm an Astros fan, best case is a second half guy. Best case. And I hope it is the best case because, yeah, I love that kid. I love his stuff. I love his compete. Boston, and this is what happens when you sign pitchers with records, track records that you know of. James Paxton, when he's healthy, he is a stud. He's only had 5 starts the last 2 years. He left his Friday start with a grade 1 hamstring pull. Same thing as the abdominal in the sense that he's not playing catch while he's out, right? So I would tell you to let's talk 4 weeks. 4 weeks is the window. If everything goes okay, he's back in a month. Every week after the first week that he doesn't throw, add a week to to 2 weeks to the back end. So if it ends up not being serious, maybe he doesn't. I don't see him breaking with the team because you're talking about what 20 some days until opening day. So that won't happen for Paxton, I don't think, unless he's right back. But I don't imagine that's going to be the case. And Dodgers closer Daniel Hudson. He has right angle tenderness, which I understand ankles a little bit. And I don't know what that means, right? I don't know what that means. Some guys are different. I mean, I played with guys who, if they weren't 100%, they were hurt. And I played with other guys who, if it wasn't cut off, they were playing. So that's kind of, and he's a closer. That one doesn't kind of strike me as being scary or serious until it's announced as such. And then to speak of scary or serious, the White Sox, Liam Hendricks. I don't know how many people know this. He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He's in camp, which is awesome, as he undergoes treatment. And no timetable, which nobody cares about, honestly, except for him, obviously. Kendall Graveman will probably take over closing duties, which, again, nobody really cares about in light of the story. So this shows thoughts and prayers from my family and I and this show and everybody at OutKick to Liam and his family to get better fast. It certainly can be done. I can remember watching in 2007. I can remember watching John Lester pitch the clincher of the World Series after being out a year before with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you're talking about a different breed of human being when you're talking about professional athletes and their mental capacity to overcome.
So that brings up the question I've wanted to ask you, Curt, which is there's a bunch of teams this year that are entering the season with a closer by committee. What are your thoughts on closer by committee versus having a main closer?
In 2 words, it's ass. Here's the problem. This is where sabermetrics and baseball clash, and the sabermetric guys don't understand why the baseball guys can't just get it. When the sabermetric guys look at a bullpen, they look at a list of data, right? First pitch strikes, who gets the first hitter out, which is the big hitter for the reliever, more than the other guys. Walks, your whip, how you hold runners, all these other things. The problem is that none of those factors account for the inning in which that happens. And unfortunately for sabermetric guys, pitchers think differently in the 9th inning than they do in the 8th, than they do in the 7th, than they do in the 6th. It's just human nature. Because everybody in the 9th inning hitting in a game that's close is hitting with the mentality of the tying runs on third, I need to get him in or get on base. That's a different mental approach than they take for their other at-bats during the game, for the most part. Pitchers have to change and elevate in the ninth inning their mental approach to pitching, and some guys just can't do it. It's just not. I mean, I can remember, I think it was in my career, 2003, the Red Sox went with a closer by committee to open the season, and they had a great bullpen. It turned out to be a disaster. It doesn't work. Now, if you bring your pitchers up through the minor leagues on a closer by committee system, maybe that's different. Maybe that is different. But the fact of the matter is, pitchers and hitters step on the mound in the ninth inning and at the plate in the ninth inning with a different mentality. You can like that or not like that. You can call them wusses or whatever, but that's just fact. And just because you deny that doesn't make it any less true. So you have to have the guys with the right. And I think what I'm starting to see, Bill, and I actually, it's kind of a 1970s mentality, is the guy, the stopper. I'm going to bring this guy into the seventh inning because the most important situation is right now. Runners on second and third, nobody out. It's a one-run game. You know, you'd never think of bringing Mariano Rivera in that situation. But teams will bring in their stopper, the guy who has the ridiculous strikeout rate, to get out of that seventh inning jam, because that's the most important situation probably for the game. And then we'll fill the ninth inning out however we need to. That's a very different, but you know, back in the 70s, that guy that came in the seventh was, you know, Goose Gossett, who was still in the ninth. It's a different thing now because they want their relievers available every day they can be. So it's a different thing. And I remember, I got to tell you, one of the things that you need to understand as fans is there are teams, and this is honest. I had a manager, more than one manager, tell me this. There are teams who the general manager will go down to the manager's office and tell the manager who he can use from the bullpen that night. Obviously, managers despise that. But the front office, in their minds, they've calculated pitchers' effectiveness pitching on back-to-back days, pitchers' effectiveness pitching with a day off, pitching 3 days in a row, and they have the numbers that say he can or do this, he can't do this, or he excels at this, and he's, you know, unfortunately, that's not that. I don't want to say that translates verbatim. It's also one of the reasons why I think sabermetrics has cost some teams World Series and playoff series, because sabermetrics to me don't apply in October. So yeah, I'm not a fan. I don't know how fans feel about it, but I think pitching changes are boring as hell.
Well, nobody really likes the pitching changes, but I also think fans, as a general rule, love stars, and closers are stars.
Right.
They come in situations you expect them to come in, and you expect them to perform.
But behind that is the fact that the rule change of a pitcher having to face three hitters changes everything.
Yeah, it sure does.
Changes everything, because now what you're seeing is the elimination of the left-handed specialist. Because generally the left-handed specialist was a guy who could abuse lefties and got owned by righties, and can't do it anymore. So that's probably one of the bigger reasons why. And I disagree with that rule too, but that's neither here nor there. And then, so I was saving this for near the end of the show for very specific reasons. He's going to be a guest on the show at some point, and he's one of my favorite human beings of all time. Our careers were very intertwined for a long period of time. And I can promise you that if I ask the viewers of this show to rank the Major League Baseball managers top to bottom on the handsome list, which is what players were asked to do for this poll, the winner of the award from the players would not be the winner of the award from the fans. Because the most handsome manager, and this guy's anything but handsome, even though I do love him deeply, the most handsome manager in the big leagues. So let me back up. Gambling.com used an app to rank Major League Baseball's 30 managers by their looks. A press release was sent out to many members of the baseball media announcing that this man took home the title with a handsome manager score of 7.96. I don't know how he got above a 5, but Terry Francona of the Indians won most handsome manager. Tito, my God. The brainwash that's been done there for that to happen is impressive.
Well, and the really
because
cool part, Curt, was the team then made up T-shirts of
yes, the
him.
Cle- and this is where. So you know what? I'm gonna quickly. This when we talk about the dynamics of a clubhouse, one of the things that you can't understand as a fan, but that is so instrumental and huge, are the clubhouse guys. The clubhouse manager. I had some of the greatest clubhouse managers you can ever imagine. Roger and Joe, and I mean, just phenomenal guys. But they're very much your wife away from home. They have a huge impact on the environment in the clubhouse. The clubhouse manager had T-shirts printed up, and all the players got them. And again, it might seem like a little thing, but things like that matter, and they impact. It's very unique to the club. They're the only 30 guys with the T-shirts. And I know, again, that it might sound trivial, but those are the things, excuse me, and this is exactly the clubhouse I would expect to have in Cleveland, because Tito, always had these clubhouses. So you got 30 guys walking around with the most handsome manager, and I guarantee you the daily ribbing is phenomenal, and to be heard. But Terry Francona, is walking around with most handsome manager T-shirt that he won by vote. If that doesn't tell you where the state of the game is, then nothing will. And by the way, don't go to sleep on the Indians. And I know most people aren't, but they're probably going to. They got some legacies there. Shane Bieber, who is as good as they come when he's healthy. Aaron Savale, two legacies in Zach Plesac, Cal Quantrill, two guys I played with their fathers. And then Emmanuel Clace, James Karinchak, and Trevor Stephen. Is it Stephen or Stephen? Trevor Stephen?
Stephen.
Trevor Stephen setting them up. Nice staff. Obviously, again, the reason you like the Indians is because and if you look at their metrics last year, they just found a way to score enough runs and win each game, more than not. But that team will institute and implement these new rules in a way that gives them an advantage. And Tito has learned, I think, since his younger days with me, that he can't leave his starter out there for 147 pitches. And I think he's probably as good as there is at managing. Him and Buck were two of the best I ever saw at managing staffs. And generally, you will find a situation where neither one of those guys will have the wrong guy on the mound for the hitter that's at the plate. And that's, in this day and age, that's not a small thing.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got some
Yep.
time left here, and we've
Okay.
been soliciting questions from the people that are watching the podcast and at OutKick.com.
Yep.
And a bunch of the questions coming in are about your time with the Phillies. So I'm going to start there. Mike Johnson asks, tell me your best story from the 1993 Phillies locker room.
All right. First off, I can't, because I think there are legal implications of telling that story. Because I don't know if there's a statute of limitations. What I can tell you is, and I didn't realize at the time, but as I played, I did. When you played on teams that were successful and kind of, we knew in spring training that we were very good. I don't know, and I think we knew after opening day and after opening series, when we swept Houston. This was the year they had signed Doug Drabeck and Greg Swindell and were supposed to be contenders. We swept them. We had a lot of confidence, but that clubhouse was one that guys would sleep over and guys would show up at 11 a.m. on the game days to be there. It was so fun. There's so much energy, and every day you would hear something out of Lenny's mouth or Crucky's mouth that you couldn't make up. I mean, there was some contention in there. Guys who didn't get along. On Mitch and I never got along, but at 705, it never mattered. We killed for each other in a sense, and we played for each other. And that clubhouse was, I guess the only word I can use is nonstop. And the other thing was, and this was early in my career, and I wasn't a big part of this, but the training room in that clubhouse was probably open till 2 to 3 a.m. every night with the same 4 to 6 guys in it after a game. Crucky would generally sleep on the couch in the video room, wake up to a breakfast of hot dogs and mayonnaise, and then go 3 for 5 and play legitimately studly first base. I mean, it was so because we truly were kind of everybody else. We were the island of misfit toys. You know, we said, I think we said that the saying when we went to Atlanta for the playoffs was, you know, at the time, Atlanta was TBS, America's team. It was America's team against America's most wanted. And we played that to the hilt. And that city, we loved our city and our fans, and our city and fans loved us.
That was a very fun team as a fan to watch. I do remember once you got to the playoffs, your reliever, Mitch Williams, had thrown so many innings.
Yeah, he was done.
And he clearly tired when it got into it. Mike W. asks, do you think that Jim Fergosi should have used the bullpen differently in 93?
Well, in hindsight, yes. Yes, absolutely. He should have kept Roger Mason in. However, what you had was, and remember, Mitch blew every save in the postseason that year. He blew Game 1 of the Braves series, Game 5 of the Braves series. He blew Game 4 of the World Series and Game 6 of the World Series. He was done. And by the way, not only was he done, but he was facing one of the best lineups I've ever faced in my life. But Roger had thrown a great inning. Roger threw really well that postseason. But here's the thing. You got to understand how this is where being human comes into play. Jim Fergosi, had he not brought Mitch Williams in and Joe Carter did what he did off of Roger Mason, we would be sitting here saying, why didn't you do what you've done all year? And he played, that was the safe move. It was a nightmare move because you had Ricky Henderson leading off the bottom of the ninth, which is probably the surest odds you'll ever get on a walk. And Mitch was throwing 85, 86. He wasn't doing anything, you know, and then he throws a slider, which he never really actually had one, to Joe Carter that doesn't slide. Mitch was, it wasn't, I don't think any of us, you know, in a sense, blame him, even though he was the guy. I mean, Lenny would probably disagree with that. But the fact of the matter is, you win as a team, you lose as a team. And that team won together and lost together. And it was the only year of my career that ended in a way that I was thinking it shouldn't have ended. That team was, in my mind, we were supposed to win it. And that city deserved that winner. So there you go.
That's tremendous. Hey, for all you listening out there, please get on OutKick.com. Send us your questions. My email is bill.graff, Graff, at OutKick.com. Email me questions. Please tune in to OutKick.com so that you can see all the baseball coverage we're doing and all the other great articles that are written on OutKick.com. Curt.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Garrick38. And please, I've grown in love with and very fond of the OutKick.com website. We're gonna build this brand to be something, hopefully someday to rival Barstool without the boobs. Without all the boobs. There may be some boobs, I don't know. But I'm enjoying this and having a blast. Bill, I look forward to it. I will see you again in a couple of days.
Yep, we'll be back Friday. Have a good one, everybody.
Take care, buddy.